My inside out theory of consciousness means that the parts of consciousness that are trauma related, which is the majority of my consciousness, we have over a dozen parts and only one or two normal life self, and only one that's going to be officially taking that role, like for good. And so all of the parts that are trauma related operate from the subconscious. Even if they're in the consciousness and in control of the consciousness, their function of operations, the manner in which they exist, the specific energetic details of their neural pathways is all subconscious. And it causes there to be this dramatic shift of experience. For example, the going on with normal life self has a much lower tolerance for pain, yet a much higher tolerance for sensitivity. This includes, everything from like sounds and vibrations to like jokes and conversations and like social interactions. So the going on with normal life self has a much lower pain tolerance, yet a much higher tolerance for like general sensitivity. And so the trauma related parts have a huge high pain tolerance, yet the slightest sounds, the slightest vibrations, the slightest, sarcastic joke is like super triggering, super upsetting, but the pain tolerance is just absurdly high, like unhuman, like unnatural. And so, yeah, this is an aspect of the theory I've been cultivating for the past year that explains what I experienced with living with a dissociative identity as the inside-out theory of consciousness. And it means my conscious was operating from a inside-out capacity. The subconscious was up front, and the going on with the normal life self, the part of me that's supposed to be out here functioning, was tucked so far back into the subconscious that I didn't even know she was still in existence, basically. I thought I was just this intensely traumatized person, and that was all there was to me. And so a lot of different things I experienced, especially in the past year and a half since really exploring the dissociative identity disorder diagnosis and like what living with a dissociative identity actually means. The inside out theory of consciousness would just explain so much of it. All of that is within the subconscious, knowing how to breathe, eat, sleep, just basic internal processes, knowing how to keep your heart beating so you stay alive. That's all happening within the subconscious. And then our consciousness, the conscious 5% of our consciousness that we have like direct access to, our conscious awareness, right? That is the stuff like talking and thoughts and accessible memories where you can describe things that happened, and memorized facts, and the ability to speak. Like right now, I'm creating these words because my conscious awareness is focused on a specific topic and I'm talking about it, right? My subconscious knows how to move my mouth, but all of the message of what I'm saying is all within my conscious awareness being controlled there. So my theory is that when living with a dissociative identity, when there are only trauma parts up front, the consciousness is operating as if it were inside out. And because of this, it causes a lot of chaos within the experience of life. And it could also potentially even explain things like how I gained tolerance for meds really quickly. Because if the things that regulate how medicine goes into the body and what it does and stuff is within the subconscious, and that part of my being was suddenly up front and could pick and choose, in theory, it could say, no, I'm not accepting this, into my experience or something. Like, it's still a working theory, but it kind of makes a little bit of sense to me, because the more trauma parts that were out, the more heightened my state of dysregulated sympathetic nervous system was. The more crap I was going through, the more trauma parts were present, the faster I would gain a tolerance to psychiatric medications and even like over-the-counter medications. When it was just the going on with normal life self and there hadn't been more extensive traumas in adulthood, I always dissociate when I say that. When it was just the going on with normal life self before there were more trauma parts present, we'll put it that way, less dissociating, less triggering, then medication was more effective. And then the more there was dissociation, other parts present, the faster I would gain a tolerance. Even things like NyQuil worked differently depending on what state I was in. If it was Felicity or Felicity and Xena, for example. So Inside Out Theory of Consciousness, been building it for a year and I'm excited to keep working on it. I'm so excited about this. There's just so much to this theory of inside out consciousness. The other thing that it would explain is the distortion of time. Mind is so blown right now. The subconscious experiences everything as present tense. The subconscious only exists as present tense. Everything that is inside of the subconscious, everything that's happening is all present tense. When the messages get sent up, it's all present tense. The subconscious only communicates in present tense, and so trauma-related memories are all implicit memories, meaning they're all in the subconscious, stored as implicit memories. And so when those get projected into the conscious awareness, when they get triggered, brought to the attention of the brain and the body, triggered, it projects it, and that's why it feels like it's happening all over again. It feels like this trauma is happening in the present tense because the subconscious only exists and communicates in the present tense. That's just how it exists. The conscious awareness is where things are linear. There's a concept of time. And so if the subconscious parts were dominantly in the front, that would explain distortion of time because there isn't this linear concept of time to them. And without there being this going on with normal life self part present, there couldn't be this linear concept of time. It makes so much sense. Another example of applying this recently is the trauma-related parts can remain much more grounded when using noise-canceling headphones, whereas the going on with normal life self, if completely like stable and totally unblended, it's just the going on with normal life self part out, not blended with trauma parts. Then the noise-canceling headphones can actually cause dissociation. There has to be this like sense of what's going on in the surroundings to even be able to be out, whereas that is just disorienting and triggering as heck for the trauma parts. And so a little peek into this, the subconscious, that's all the procedural learning and things like knowing how to breathe, knowing how to digest your food, knowing how to sleep, like basic bodily functions, that's all within the subconscious. The inside out theory of consciousness could also explain tastes and textures. When I eat and the trauma parts are around, things can very easily feel like they're not even edible, like I'm eating dirt or rubber or we had a few specific descriptions. I'll have to find those and add them to this theory, but things would just randomly not taste like the food that I knew it was, and that was when the trauma parts were around. And whenever Felicity is here unblended, tastes are like so enjoyable. They're so intense, they're so distinct, they're so delicious, they're so specific. And all of that was lost when there's trauma parts. When trauma parts were fronting, and still can be lost, although not to the same degree, when I'm blended with them.